Amen.
Hello, hello. Is this thing on? Yay. This is because I didn't cry for 40 years. And when you don't cry for 40 years and the floodgates open, you just never know.
How many you need?
How many boxes of tissue I'm going to need. Oh, my coffee. Also, my 20-year-old is moving out tomorrow. Thank you for whoever showed sympathy there. I appreciate that. I happen to really like him. Oh, there it is. Yesterday, we were in the car moving his stuff to Orlando, and he will move his person to Orlando tomorrow. But on the way back, we were having a very riveting discussion on the legalization of certain narcotics. And he said one of the wisest things that I've ever heard anybody say in my life. And if you know Connor, that will shock you. No offense, baby, if you happen to watch this. But he said, I would rather know the truth than be right. And just the humility and the wisdom in a statement like that, it really struck me because I really like being right. I really like making things right. I'm a perfectionist in recovery. But there's just something so striking about that kind of posture of arriving at a discussion or a relationship or whatever it may be, and just wanting to be open to knowing what is real, what is true, what is good, what is noble, what is right, rather than I myself being the one who is right. And I really felt like I needed to lead with that, because if you know me, I am not the most humble person you will ever meet. Right, Steph? Yeah. We have been poking fun at me for years about my pride problem. It's getting better. So there's the one Monty Python reference of the day. There'll probably be more. But just, I don't even know where to go with that, other than today's going to be a little bit different than anything I've ever, the kind of way. Anybody here for the Matthew 24 thing I did, it was like drinking from a fire hose. And I'm going to speak off the cuff probably more today than I usually do. And that is because I am moving my 20-year-old this weekend. And also because, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Liz. And I am in a weird transition period of my life. I'm on my 4th or 5th career. I've lost count. I'm in grad school. I'm the mom of my cohort. Shocker, right? I, in addition to going to school, have 2 jobs, and I'm pursuing a 3rd in order to meet my professional goals. I'm a little overwhelmed, very distracted, not very connected to Jesus right now. And so that is my confession before you today. On Friday, I, like Drew, did not want to be here. Actually, that was Thursday. I'm also on a research team. We're publishing a paper, and I found a very big problem with the paper, and it was work on that paper or prepare my message at that moment. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to John and let him know that this is a no-go. Somebody's going to have to fill in a pinch. But I pumped the brakes on that. By Friday morning, I had put fingernails to keyboard and had started to prepare something and was mid-text of, okay, John, the best I could get out was my summary of the podcast. That's it. That's all you're getting is a summary of the Bible Project podcast. But I waited, and by Saturday morning, I had this message for you. So I do believe that that was a work of God, not of me, because every step of the way, I was like, now is not my time, Jesus. And he's like, psych, you thought. We talk about the Bible Project a lot here, but maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with it, you may not know why. I, for one, find it to be an incredibly invaluable resource. The podcast episodes are by far my favorite. It's two guys in humility just trying to discover what Jesus meant, what he said when he did, and what the biblical authors. I actually was talking to one of my cohort mates. There's only 7 of us, and we're very, very close. And 2 of us get to drive to Lakeland twice a week together. And then I really like being with her, but the hour-and-a-half drive to Lakeland's not so fun. But on the way back on Wednesday, we were talking about Christianity. She's very involved in her church. And, I was like, so, you do all these things. What's your relationship with Jesus like? And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, if our faith is built on the truth that Jesus came back to life after he died, which people don't do, and he is alive still today, what is your relationship with him like? Like, what's that connection like? And it was just in that conversation that she said that there were things that had been taught to her over the years that she just wasn't sure that she believed anymore. And it was more about what Christians have done with the scriptures more than the scriptures themselves. I don't know. What was the point? Why did I bring this up? I think it was because she said, I just think that when we read the Bible, we basically just get to interpret it. Like we take away from it whatever we think it's saying to us in that moment. And I said, I totally understand that. There are things about the Bible that I was taught as I was growing up that I don't ascribe to anymore. It does require a lot of rethinking and chewing on it and meditating and figuring some stuff out. I said, but I do think that the authors had an intention when they put quill to papyrus, I don't know, back in the day. They had something that they were trying to say. And it takes a lot of effort to figure that out 2,000 years later, 4 languages later. So the Bible Project for me is a resource, a very, very good resource of, I don't have to learn Greek or Hebrew, even though I like languages. I don't have to do all of the digging on my own. These guys literally spend their lives reading the things that are too smartly written for me to read. And they chew it up, and they spit it back out, and I listen to it, and I don't know. That's my commercial for the Bible Project. The resources are phenomenal. So check them out if you get a chance. Last week, we did learn from Lisa that Jesus as Israel's Messiah. Oh, by the way, I learned the magic of ChatGPT this week. Hallelujah to the people who created that, by the way. So I took Lisa's message and I put it into ChatGPT and I said, summarize this for me. This is what the gospel according to ChatGPT says. Last week, we learned from Lisa that Jesus as Israel's Messiah claims to fulfill Israel's story, bringing it to its intended goal. He emphasizes the importance and eternal nature of the Torah, urging his followers to uphold every aspect of it. The righteousness required in the kingdom of heaven surpasses that of the Pharisees and the experts in the law. Jesus invites his followers to embrace this greater righteousness, which aligns with the wisdom of the Torah and God's will. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches us how to live by this greater righteousness, summarizing the Torah and the prophets through the golden rule, the greatest commandment, and the call to be perfect and complete like God the Father. This week, we will talk about how the next phase of Matthew's account of the Sermon on the Mount starts with the first of 6 examples of what it looks like for followers of Jesus to live by the wisdom of the Torah and fill it to the full. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 5, 21 through 26. No. I should have, I know as I went on, I was like, I should have closed out the chat beach form. Okay. Normally I make you guys look stuff up, but since I got a little lazy this week, so can you. All right. But if you're a note taker, you might want to grab a pen and paper because we're going to do something fun in a minute. Okay. You have heard that it was said to the ancients, you will not murder, and whoever murders will be guilty by the court. And I say to you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be guilty by the court. Whoever calls his brother good for nothing will be guilty by the Sanhedrin, and whoever says fool will be guilty of the fire of Gehenna. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. Settle matters in a friendly way with your legal opponent while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent doesn't hand you over to the court judge, and the court judge to the officer, so that you are thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you will not come out of there until you have paid back the last coin. So I'm going to start out with just an overview of all 6 verses. First, next slide. Thanks, baby. Oh, speaking of baby, I made his life a living hell this morning with all of these slides. So can we give it up to Clay for creating so that there actually is something? I now know what I need to do differently and better. Okay, so first, and this is kind of formulaic for the next one, the next 6, all 6. He's going to say, first, you have heard it said, and I say to you, and then he will give more teaching on it. So the first thing that he says, he quotes directly from the Torah, which is, in this case, Exodus 20, do not murder. And then he goes on to say what Jesus' fulfilling of the Torah looks like. He says, don't murder, and don't be angry with your brother, or call your brother good for nothing, or say fool. Now note, this is not a contrast. If it were a contrast, then Jesus would be saying, well, you heard not to murder, but it's okay to murder. As long as you're not angry when you kill someone, you're fine. Obviously, this is not a contrast. Rather, it's a comparison. So he's trying to draw some kind of similarity between the two. So in addition to not killing people, you can be super proud of yourself, as the Pharisees might be in their cup, of not killing people. And I say to you also, do not be angry. Call your brother good for nothing or fool. A good student teaches a good teacher teaches students what to think, but a great teacher teaches students how to think. And Jesus, as the greatest teacher, is teaching his listeners to think. And he does so by the way of this comparison. And then he goes on to give them a little bit more to chew on by giving them this mini parable of reconciling with people that you've offended before continuing on with worship. He's emphasizing a point that he will carry on later about how if you are not right with God, you are not right with God if you are not right with people. He'll summarize that later in the Great Commandment. Don't come to my temple to worship me when somebody has something against you. Go make that right before you come to me. Settle with legal opponents before you get to the judge. And that's just common sense, right? Settle, 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 settle. It's a liar, liar quote it's not a very clean movie, never mind. Okay. You don't want to show up to court guilty. And in this case, in this parable, this is the person who has called their brother good for nothing, or has murdered in anger, or has called somebody a fool. And they don't want to show up to court guilty. You want to settle before you get to court. Otherwise, you will be spending your time in jail until you have paid back the last coin. So I'm going to let you guys, like Jesus, chew on the many parables on your own time and see how they fit with what we learned today. We are going to focus mostly on Jesus' filling of the Torah, what it means not to be angry with your brother, call him a good for nothing or a fool. Jesus is digging under the command to address why it's bad to kill someone. Jesus gets to the heart of the matter, the wisdom underneath the command. So, if you're a note taker, next slide. That's okay. Oh, look how pretty that is. That's wonderful. All right, so Jesus is going to outline 3 crimes and 3 consequences. Being angry with a brother, calling a brother good for nothing, and then the consequences we'll talk about in a minute. But let's focus on the crimes. If you are a note taker and you're going to write this down, this is the skeleton of what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to fill it out more. So as you're writing these things down, leave room for notes on each of these points. Great. All right, so the first one, the first crime, and go ahead and stay here. Don't go to the next slide yet. That way, if anybody is writing this down, they have time to write it down. But this first one, being angry with a brother, the language is identical to another story in the Bible where someone is angry with their brother. Anybody have a shot? Abel and Cain. Cain and Abel. Very good. The language is identical of being having that anger. Cain was angry with his brother. And once upon a time, I didn't have this part of my notes, so I'm going to try and do it from really bad memory. Once upon a time, there was a man named Adam, and he knew his wife. He knew his wife, the biblical knew. And they conceived and bared a son named Abel, and then they knew each other again and conceived another son named Cain. Now, when they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain became a farmer. And it was time for the harvest. Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. And Cain also brought a gift, the best portion of the firstborn lamb from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. And this made Cain very angry. And he looked dejected. "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at your door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and become its master." One day, Cain suggested to his brother, "Hey, let's go out to the fields." And while they were in the fields, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" "I don't know," Cain responded. "Am I my brother's guardian?" But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Genesis 4. You can go to the next slide. This is a really cool picture. Oh, look at that. That's murderous rage. That's the face of murderous rage. In this story, Jesus is not saying anger is bad. Don't be angry. He's using language that is identical to the language used in the Cain and Abel story. This is specifically murderous rage. So Jesus is not making a blanket statement against all anger or addressing whether or not emotions have a proper place in the life of a Christian. He is specifically addressing murderous rage. I'm in school to become a therapist, so I really like emotions. In fact, the kind of therapy that I am studying to become certifiable in is emotionally focused therapy. So I actually really like feelings, and I like what they can teach us, and I like how we can use them. So I have a sidebar about feelings, but I'm going to put a pin in that, and we're going to come back to it another day. However, I do think that this misunderstanding about the place of emotions and feelings in the life of Christians has been with us for a very, very long time. I think this may be why Paul in Ephesians feels the need to clarify a few decades later after Jesus says this in his letter to Ephesians, be angry and do not sin. But we'll just go on to the next slide. Contempt. They both kind of see it, right? Like, I mean, the one that stands out is her, right? The half roll and the body language away from him. But he's got the one eyebrow up, right? So I see a little bit there too, right? Yeah, exactly. So the word for contempt is good for nothing, and it's a really strong word. It's raka. It literally means empty one. Like I said, it's a term of contempt. You're calling someone worthless, useless, below unimportant, like not even worth like considering them to be a person. This, I think, is a word that today we think of where we actually go on to dehumanize a person, or in my field, we call it depersonalizing somebody. We can attribute to the weather human things, right? We give the weather human, the weather's really angry today. We can give the weather human characteristics, but then we actually do the opposite with people sometimes. And we take away their humanity, specifically when we're angry with them or when we feel that they've wronged us, right? They become they or them or those people or whatever racial slur or other derogatory term we can think of. But this is the strong stuff, right? This is the stuff you see on Facebook. This is the stuff that's so easy to say when that person's not right in front of you. This is the comments section on every website ever, right? Contempt. This is full. You're welcome. This is moron, idiot, fool, nitwit, twit, blockhead, bonehead, cretin, dimwit, dork. Oops, I say that one a lot. Dumbbell, dunce, ignoramus, imbecile, muttonhead, nincompoop, ninny, pinhead, or simpleton. These are your everyday run-of-the-mill insults. I figured, why not go political given the climate, okay? So let's go back to our slides here. Filled out our crimes, our murderous rage, vicious public shaming, and then everyday insults. Would you say these crimes are intensifying or de-intensifying in nature? Well, no, they're de-intensifying, right? Because murdering is way badder. Right? So these are kind of de-intensifying. In our world, it's way worse to kill someone than it is to call them an idiot, right? Do you go to jail for calling someone an idiot? Can you get the electric chair for killing someone? Yeah. So in our world and in our justice system, and even in our own sense of right and wrong, we give ourselves the bye on calling someone a moron. But we don't give ourselves the bye on killing people. So we have our own internal senses of justice, and Jesus is playing with this on purpose. He is purposefully de-intensifying the crimes because he is getting ahead of myself. So let's talk about the consequences. The words, I'm not going to Hebrew yet on things, but we have that when you're angry with your brother, you are guilty by a court. Now, this court is specifically a reference to their tribal courts. So you guys know that there were 12 tribes in Israel and that they got up and the land got divided, and then you were supposed to originally live with your people, your tribe, or whatever. And then if you needed a matter settled, you would go to the local court. You would go to your tribal court, and you would handle issues there. So, yeah, the local judges, though, not the judges of the whole nation. But then as time went on, they built this thing called the Sanhedrin. And so Jesus is using that, and he's like, okay, but if you call your brother for nothing, this vicious public shaming, you're going to the Sanhedrin. And that was the 70. That for us was like the Supreme Court, where you would go to the capital. The lower court didn't give you the verdict that you were looking for, and you're going to elevate it up to the Supreme Court. You're going to go to the capital. This was the Sanhedrin for them. The Sanhedrin was in their capital, Jerusalem, and that's where the bigger issues were settled. And then, of course, we have guilty of the fire in Gehenna. What is Gehenna in your understanding or in your Bible? How is it translated? Hell. Hell. All right. Now, hell is actually not a helpful translation because our modern view of hell has been influenced by Greek and Norse traditions that came out of the ages, many hundreds of words. So next slide. This is kind of like what we think about from hell. This is a gift to us from the 1500s. So when we read our Bible and we read, he who calls his brother guilty of hell, this is what we think of. We think of the lake of fire. We think of like this angel is then taking him and he's like, no, I don't want to go. And I don't know what's happening. And I don't try not to look too closely at that. That's not pretty. Okay. But hell is not, it's not even Hades in the Greek here. The Greek is actually the word Gehenna. Next slide. Gehenna is a transliteration. That's where they don't translate the word into something different. It's where they just turn the letters into the letters of yours. So like the one on the left is literally their version of G, their version of E, their version of N, and their version of A. So Gehenna is a transliteration of the Hebrew word Gehenna. Gehenna means Gehenna. You're welcome. Now, Gehenna is also, in a way, a transliteration of the Hebrew. What you see on the right, they read from right to left, is Ge ben Hinnom. And Ge ben Hinnom, translated, would be the valley of the son of Hinnom. Similar to Jacksonville. Ville means city, the city of Jack's son. Right? So Gehenna is, once upon a time, there was a man named Hinnom, and he had a son, and they staked their claim in that valley, and it was called the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. But like everybody, they got lazy, and instead of calling it Ge ben Hinnom, it became Ge Hinnom. We're just going to forget the son. And then Ge Hinnom became Gehenna, which became Gehenna. Clear as mud? You know what's really cool is that I tried it. It didn't work. I was like, hey, Siri, give me directions to Gehenna. And there's one up north, actually. There's another city called, somebody did it. Did you hear it? But this is Israel. Gehenna is still a place in Israel today. So this street is called Ge ben Hinnom Street. You see that? The city is called the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna. And we're not there yet, so I'm not going to say my aha moment that I had this morning. But this is just interesting. You can literally go to Gehenna today. So if I said, go to hell, you can be like, okay. I'm just kidding. Because Gehenna is not hell. Gehenna is a real place with a spot on the map. So Jesus is not invoking Middle Ages hell imagery. That didn't exist yet when he's talking about Gehenna. All right. Also, next slide. I'm sorry, but Gehenna is not the fiery trash heap outside of the city. I used to teach this because that's what I was taught. So if you learned that from me, my humblest apologies. Archaeologists has taught us more in the years since that has been taught. This has actually become a scholarly urban legend at this point that a lot of theologians and scholars are trying to undo the damage that it's caused. Yes, it was a trash dump. And for a long time, we thought it was a trash dump at the time of Jesus, but it wasn't. They've been able to look and dig and find layers that are deeper that belong to Jesus' time. The lowest layer where they can find evidence of this being a fiery trash heap is not until the 13th century, 1,200 years after Jesus spoke these words. So he doesn't have that in mind either. So what did happen in Ge ben Hinnom before Jesus' day that would lead him to use this place in this story that he's telling, or in this instruction? So let's go to 2 Chronicles. Wouldn't you know, Joshua 15 is the first place where Ge ben Hinnom is mentioned, and it's when they were, like I said, dividing up it's Joshua, so they've taken the promised land, and they're dividing it up amongst the 12 tribes, and Ge ben Hinnom is mentioned as one of the cities where they used to draw out those borders. But that's probably not why Jesus is using this place in this context. 2 Chronicles 28. King Ahaz was 20 years old. Oh my gosh, I just made that connection. Could you imagine a 20-year-old president? Okay. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned. I've feel really bad for the teenagers in the room. It's just because I'm the mother of a teenager. I actually really love you guys and you're amazing, but my teenager drives me batty. Okay. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. He did not do what was pleasing in the sight of the Lord as his ancestor David had done. Instead, he followed the examples of the kings of Israel. He cast metal images for the worship of Baal. He offered sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom, even sacrificing his own sons in the fire. In this way, he followed the detestable practices of the pagan nations from the land ahead of the Israelites. So we learn here that one of the reasons that Israel was given the promised land was because the existing nations were killing their children in worship of their gods. And God said, not cool. We don't do that here. I'm going to bring in a nation that doesn't do that. And then, oh, thanks, Ahaz, bringing that right back. Okay? 2 Chronicles 33. This is a few years later. Between Ahaz and Manasseh, I'm not sure how many kings there were, but there was at least one, Hezekiah. Hezekiah was good. He did a lot of great things. But Manasseh comes on the scene when he was 12 years old. Could you imagine being 12 and king? Anyway, Manasseh was 12 years old when he became a king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, following the detestable practices of the pagan nations that the Lord had driven from the land ahead of the Israelites. He rebuilt the pagan shrines that Hezekiah had broken down. He constructed altars, images of Baal, and set up Asherah poles. He also bowed down before all the powers of the heavens and worshiped them. Horoscopes. Okay. He built pagan altars. Temple of the Lord, the place where the Lord had said, my name will remain in Jerusalem forever. He built these altars, the powers of the heavens, in both courtyards of the Lord's temple. Manasseh also sacrificed his own sons in the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom. He practiced sorcery, divination, witchcraft, and consulted with mediums and psychics. He did much that was evil in the Lord's sight, arousing his anger. So, the valley of Ben Hinnom is the place where idolatry, the murder of children in the name of a god. And this was syncretism. So, that means not only were they worshiping God, Baal and Asherah, by sacrificing their children, murdering their children, they actually thought they were worshiping Yahweh. Next slide. This comes to us from, 16-something. It got cut off there. Thanks, babe. You're the best. That's why I married him. So many reasons. I appreciate that this artist, like, even though this is a drawing or some kind of carving, I'm not sure which, I appreciate that he didn't have the stomach for putting the child directly into the fire. Right? But that's what was happening. In the valley of Ben Hinnom, the idol was there, but the child would go directly to the flames. Jeremiah prophesied during the reign of Manasseh. So this would be King Manasseh. This would be Manasseh's sons. These would be actually probably priests of Yahweh blowing their trumpets. So, and then this is Molech. It's another god that existed at that time. I couldn't find one that had Baal or Baal. So Jeremiah was a prophet prophesied during Manasseh's reign. The word of the Lord, but Jeremiah was one of warning. The kings and the nation had rejected Yahweh and his righteousness and warned that judgment was coming via the nation of Babylon. So let's read Jeremiah 7. A lot from Jeremiah 7. Man, I hope you guys had breakfast. Okay. The people of Judah have done evil in my eyes, declares the Lord. They have set up their detestable idols in the house that bears my name. They've defiled it. They've built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom and burnt their sons and daughters in the fire. Something I did not command didn't even enter my mind. So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the people will no longer call it Topheth or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no more room. Then the carcasses of this people will become food for the birds and the wild animals. There will be no one to frighten them away. I will bring an end to the sounds of joy and gladness, to the voices of the bride and bridegroom in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. The land will become desolate. The justice of God, according to Jeremiah, is coming via the Babylonian invasion, and the fires that the people lit to kill their children will become the fires that consume their. This is consistent with legal principles found elsewhere in the Torah called the law of retribution. We call it the punishment should fit the crime. It's found in the Torah in places like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, life for life. In wisdom principles such as Proverbs 26:27, whoever digs a pit will fall into it. And in narratives like Esther 7:10, Haman hung on the gallows for Mordecai. Well before the 13th century and the Middle Ages, art and literature depict the valley of the Ben Hinnom or Gehenna as the place where people suffer the fates they afflicted on others, where the wrong that they've done has been brought back on themselves. Jesus is not giving a teaching on the afterlife here. He is using the image of the valley of Ben Hinnom for its shock value. A similar shocking image can be found in more recent history. What I'm about to read is very disturbing. Do not go to the next slide yet. I recently read in a book by Christian ethicist Dr. David Gushee, in which he shares an insight into theology from a Jewish rabbi. Rabbi Greenberg never published a book at length, but some of his essays have been deeply influential in the Jewish community, in Jewish Christian dialogue circles, and among those undertaking Holocaust theology. Of Rabbi Greenberg's essays, he took note of a particularly unspeakable type of atrocity that was visited upon certain Jewish children by their Nazi murderers. Anybody who studies the Holocaust knows that the atrocities were so numerous, it becomes hard to focus on any one of them. But this detail stands out. The crematoriums could not work at one time, and therefore the people, after being gassed to death, would just be burned in open fields and with those grills, and there were children burned among them. And then, on one special day, to death. The gas chamber was out of order, and therefore the children were not gassed, but burned alive. When one of the SS men sort of had pity on the children, he would take the child and beat its head against a stone first, before putting it on a pile of fire and wood, so that the child lost consciousness. However, the regular way that they did it was just by throwing the children onto the pile. They used to put a sheet of wood, and then the whole thing was sprinkled with gasoline, and then more wood, and then more gasoline, and then more wood, and then more gasoline, and then the people would be put on them, and the fire would be lit. Now, before the image that I'm going to put up here is from a book burning. You can Google this. You can find the other images. I didn't want to put you guys through what I had to go through for this research. So next slide. After describing this scene, Rabbi Greenberg put forward the following statement. No statement, theological or otherwise, should be made that would not be credible in the presence of burning children. Greenberg's staggering proposition became known as the burning children test. Probably few readers will have ever heard of it, but it has never left me, so writes David Gushee. Test all statements, all the statements that you have about God, theology, morality, faith, life. All statements based, there's a massive typo here and it's messing me up, okay. Test all your statements on whether such statements would be credible in the kind of world in which 2-year-olds have been thrown alive onto pits of fire. And he adds, the kind of world in which Jewish 2-year-olds were burned alive by mainly baptized Christians. Places like Gehenna and Auschwitz are synonymous with the worst kinds of evil that mankind inflicts on ourselves. Reminders of the fires that we set will become fires that consume us. Going back to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus ties everyday common insults with that kind of fire. So does his brother James. Let's go to James 3. Not many of you should become teachers. Whoops. My brothers and sisters, you will be judged more severely. Yay. All of us make many mistakes after all. If anyone makes no mistakes in what they say, such a person is fully complete human being, capable of keeping firm control over their whole body as well. We put bits into the mouths of horses and make them obey us, and we could direct their whole bodies. Consider large ships, too. It takes strong winds to blow them along, but one small rudder will turn them any which way the helmsman desires. The tongue is a little part of the body. Small, a fire, ablaze, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is a world of injustice with its place established right there among our members. It defiles the whole body. It sets the wheel of nature ablaze, and it is itself set ablaze by Gehenna. Every species of beast and bird, of reptile, sea creature you see can be tamed and has been tamed by humans, but no one can tame the tongue. It is an irrepressible evil full of deadly poison. By it we bless our Lord and Father, and by it we curse humans who are made in God's likeness. Blessing and curses come out of the same mouth, my dear family. It isn't right that it should be like that. So let's go back to our note-taking slide. Our crimes reduce in intensity: murderous rage, vicious public shaming, everyday insults. But the consequences intensify. Murderous rage, you can be found guilty by that county court, that tribal court. Vicious public shaming, well, we're going to the Supreme Court for that. But an everyday insult, guilty of the fire of Gehenna. Now, I like the way that the Bible Project translates that because they use different prepositions. Yeah. Okay, they say that you can be guilty by the court, but I love that an everyday insult means I am guilty of the fire. I'm setting the fire. My everyday insults light the flames where people are burned, and just mean that that's where I go to. Loving our God means valuing our neighbor's existence as precious before him and therefore precious to us, not just in our actions or in our doctrines or in our dogmas, but also in our attitudes and our language. This is particularly convicting. I am not a nice person. It's easy to be nice for 35 minutes. I am not a nice person. You never believe what Kara said at church today. I don't even need the screen to buffer me sometimes. I can be vicious on Facebook. I have been vicious on Facebook. I'm a gossip. I am very prideful. And if I sense that I'm not the smartest person in the room, I'll take down that threat. I will. Because I'm in a cohort of only 7, and I'm the oldest and the most experienced, they all look up to me. They all feed this pride of mine. I get to work with somebody who's in a doctorate program. She knows more than me, and I hate it. Hate it. Every chance I get, trying to take her down. Just a notch or two, and not to her face. Only behind her back, thank you very much. And I can make light of it, and we can have jokes, and we can cut up, but I'm setting the fires of the valley of the Ben Hinnom. I'm the Nazi SS setting the fires that burn the children. It's a big deal. It's a bigger deal than I want it to be. It's a bigger deal than you want it to be. But it's exactly the size of the big deal or whatever that Jesus wants it to be. He's driving home a very specific point. You haven't killed anyone? Fantastic. Good job. But what does it mean to live by the wisdom underneath the Torah and fill it full? Jesus says that the law is not just about taking another life, but about ridding ourselves of this really annoying habit that we have of judging other people, of evaluating their worth, of thinking and behaving as if our opinion of their worth actually matters. God alone determines the worth of every single human because they are his image. Every human life is sacred and worthy of dignity. So here's our litmus test. Last slide. How do we, as individuals, as a church, as a denomination, as the representatives of Christ, as Christians, as a community, talk about people when they're not in the room? Let's pray. Jesus, you're amazing. Thank you for teaching us that living by the law means valuing human life. When it's in the womb, when it's out of the womb, when it's young, when it's old, when it's straight, when it's gay, when it's Republican, when it's Democrat, when it's Catholic, when it's Baptist, when it's Black, when it's Asian, when it's white, when it's Native American, when it's millennial, when it's Gen X, Gen Z, Alpha, or whatever we're on now, I don't know. Every boomers, God bless the boomers, we love you. Every human life has dignity and worth. And our everyday common insults of individuals or people groups that we've decided that we are smarter than, more moral than, or superior to, you love them no less than you love us. Fill us with the humility and the wisdom that my son spoke yesterday, that we would desire to know the truth more than to be right. In Jesus' name, amen.
I don't want to sit. Hello.
What's your shirt say? Just kidding, be right back. Jesus.
My son got it for my birthday yesterday. It was her birthday, too. Sorry, that was louder than intended. I aggressively told everyone it was your birthday. She's my birthday twin. Okay, announcements. First things up, small groups. They have started, however, if you are inclined to start another, it is not too late. So by all means, follow that prompt, follow that nudging, and let John know about it. Yeah. One of the ones that started was Clay House Men's Group. It started back Monday. Let's see.